All right. Hello, everyone. Hello, happy Thursday. Can everybody hear me and see me? Excellent. Thumbs up works for me. Welcome, everybody. Happy Thursday, and welcome to Tasting Like a Pro with Saint Superi. My name is Manny Gonzalez. I am the VIP Consumer Trade and Event Manager here at Saint Superi, down at the Rutherford Ranch. I'm also a certified sommelier through the Court of Master Sommeliers. So very excited to be here with you guys when we're tasting like pros. You may remember Tammy from last week. Tammy Richards is our VP National Sales Manager and is also a Wine and Spirits Education Trust Certified Educator. So she knows her stuff. And she is going to be walking us through the basics that the pros use when we're tasting wine. So before we get to it, just a friendly reminder, if you do have any questions and there's a moment, please feel free to jump in and ask. Alternatively, if we're in the middle of something or you don't want to forget your question, you can just pop it into the chat, and that way we can make sure that we are addressing your questions as they come. All right, so without further ado, hopefully we all have some wine poured. All right, so let's go and take it over to Tammy so we can learn to taste like a pro.
Hi, everybody. Great to see you. Make sure you got your wine ready. So first question is, why would you want to learn how to taste like a pro? You know, isn't wine tasting considered like intimidating, if for the pros at least, right? But we don't want you to think that only sommeliers have these superhuman taste buds where they can describe things and they can say all these words you've never even thought of for wine. In the truth, the good news is, except if you've got some kind of rare medical condition, everybody can become an expert taster. So we're going to help you through it. You just need three things. Practice, which is pretty fun. It's wine, right? You need the time, and you need what we call a systematic approach. And that's what the professionals use, a systematic approach. So a systematic approach to tasting wine gives you a lot of things. First off, it helps you understand wine, its components, the structure, the flavors. It helps you figure out why you like it and what is it about that wine that you like. And remember wine. So what you're going to do is you're going to build this mental memory like a scrapbook for wine. And then most importantly, it helps you talk to your friends and other wine lovers to share the experience and have a common dialogue and common language. So it makes it just a lot more fun. So tasting wine professionally is about a lot more than just savoring the wine, right? You're not just going to drink it down like when we're at our homes by ourselves, nobody's watching. It also, tasting wine professionally is going to engage your sight and your smell. So to learn to taste like a sommelier, you're going to simply follow like your senses, your sight, your smell, your taste, which I'll talk about more in just a couple minutes. And then there's a couple other things that we need to consider. We need to consider the setting. First off, lighting. You've got to have good enough lighting to be able to judge the wine's appearance. And we're going to talk more about it. You've got to have a room that's free of any kind of strong odors. You want to avoid interference with the wine's aromas. So you don't wear cologne or perfume if you're going to go to a wine tasting, like a real one out and you're not in your living room. You don't want to wear those, okay? You want to have a clean palate. You don't want anything like toothpaste or coffee or any kind of strong flavor on your palate. You want to have the proper temperature for the wine. So we're going to keep it very basic for this. You know, whites should be chilled and reds should be at room temperature, basically. But there's something you should know about what temperature does to wine, just so you're thinking about it. Because it's your preference. But wines that are really, really cold, those could help, the chilling of it could help hide some of the flaws that might be in the wine that you would only really see if it was a little bit warmer, like at room temperature. And then if you this is like a traditional standard wine glass, right? If you hold your glass of wine like you see some people when they're out at an event like this, you're actually warming the wine up. You're holding the bowl and you're warming that wine up with your hand, which is why most traditional glasses have a stem. So you can hold it down here and you're not warming it at all. So you've got to have proper glassware. You can have the basic like this, but all glassware should be odorless, colorless, and just pure, no residues. So nothing is going to interfere with the wine. And then certain shapes can be better also. So Manny took a really cool class, and she's going to talk to you about the different shapes of the wine glass and what it does for your wine. Manny, back to you.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool tasting, very eye-opening for sure. So there is a trend amongst glassware producers like Riedel, which we can find at pretty much anywhere nowadays, which is great, where they're specializing in varietal specific or style specific glassware. So talking about like a glass that's made specifically for wine made from Pinot Noir grapes, or a glass that's specifically for white wine from Burgundy, which is also made of Pinot Noir grapes most of the time. And something very typical, which we all usually see, white glassware made for wines from Bordeaux. So that's the one we'll talk about. The wine from Bordeaux, the glass from Bordeaux typically looks like this. It's a little bit bigger in size than a white wine glass. It has a generous bowl, which is basically the big part of the glass. And they design it like that so that the bouquet of the wine can really develop. And in Bordeaux style wines and Bordeaux wines from Bordeaux, they're very big wines and they need a lot of space to kind of let that bouquet develop. Also, by having the big generous bowl, we allow a little more oxygen into the glass. It helps smooth out some of those rough edges that we might not like about our Bordeaux wines. And then the rim of the glass, they actually cut it as opposed to rolling it, so that when the wine does hit your palate or your tongue, it is hitting it at the where we perceive sweetness for Bordeaux wine. So they want us to perceive that sweetness of the fruit first, so it'll hit our tongues right on the tip, because that's kind of where we perceive sweetness. And that's in order to emphasize the fruit that's present in the Bordeaux wines, to kind of mellow out the acidity that's there, and to kind of play down the bitterness that tannin in wine brings to us. So if we're putting it straight in the tip as opposed to bitter, where we process bitter on the sides of our tongue. So we're shooting it to the right place, and ultimately the glass is actually allowing the wine to achieve balance before you take a sip, which helps us to perceive and experience the wine in the most balanced and desirable way. So glassware can be very, very important.
Cool. Awesome. This is a really cool class. I want to try it next time it comes around. So what are the basic steps to tasting like a pro? The basic steps are look, smell, taste, and think. Okay, so it's going to be pretty easy. Look, smell, taste, and think. No quiz afterwards. Just some really easy ways for you to remember this, so you can practice, right? Lots of wine when you're on your own. So we're going to start with look. Take your wine glass, and when we say look, we're talking about the appearance of the wine. We don't spend a lot of time on the appearance as professionals, but there's a couple things that you might notice. The color and the intensity of the color of the wine can hint at the age of a wine. So for colors, most white wines, they're described in the professional terminology from lemon to amber. And because most wine is meant to be drunk young, almost all white wines are going to be called lemon. You might have a cellar, you might have some stuff that's got some hints of age on it, but for this purpose, this is lemon, okay? And for reds, they're going to go from purple to tawny. And the most common is just a step above purple, and it's ruby. So it's pretty bright red. And again, they're meant to be drunk young, so that makes sense. So give your glass a swirl. We're looking at right now, look again at the intensity. The intensity is how much color is in that wine. So if you can look through your glass and see your fingers or the stem of the glass, that's not a very intensely colored wine. But if you had a red wine right now and you couldn't see through to that stem, that would be called opaque, and it would be a pretty high on the intensity scale. So white wines, just so you know, white wines tend to get darker, deepen, as they become older. And so they become more opaque, harder to see through, while reds are the opposite. Reds tend to become more transparent as they age and easier to see through. Go ahead and give your glass a little swirl again. And now we're looking for, coming down the sides of the glass, we're looking for what some people call tears, but most of us in the industry call legs. These are the legs coming down. And the legs running down the side of this glass, if they're thicker and slower, it usually means that they're high, that this wine is higher in alcohol, or it could have some residual sugar in it. Okay, now we're on to smell. So we've looked, now we're smelling. We're talking about the nose, the aromas when we're smelling. So 80% of tasting wine is attributed to the sense of smell, actually. So this is a very important step. Most of the pleasure you're getting when you're tasting wine is actually from the aromas. So you're going to go ahead and swirl it lightly and take a short sniff. If you're getting aromas that are immediately apparent, those are called pronounced aromas. If they're kind of hard to detect and you really got to look for them, those are light, and everything else we just call in the middle for the sake of ease. Okay, so Ryan's put up what's an example of an aroma wheel. You can find these all over the internet. There's different ones from different institutions and companies and stuff. But what they basically do, if you're really trying to get into this, he's going to forward it for me a little bit. They'll show you like fruit flavors and give you ideas of what you might want to just use for words for when you're describing your aromas and your flavors. But they're all over the internet. You can find them. They're kind of fun to play with. There are 3 types of aromas that you would find on any of these wheels: primary, secondary, and tertiary. So first, second, and third aromas. So your primary aromas are the ones that come directly from the grapes usually. So it could smell grapey, it could smell like fruits, or have hints of floral or herbaceousness, right? So those are primary. Your secondary ones are aromas that are created after the fermentation has happened in the winemaking. So let's say you've gone through fermentation and now you've put the wine to ferment into an oak barrel, and that is going to give it some different aromas, right? You might get vanilla or cinnamon or smokiness in the wine now, because after fermentation, it's sitting there. Some wines get cream and butter, depending on a process the winemakers might use called malolactic fermentation. But those are your secondary. They happen after the fermentation. And then your tertiary aromas, those third aromas, are the ones that come from the actual aging process. So if you did age in oak, you might get like coffee and caramel notes from the oxidation that the wine goes through as it's aging in that oak, and oxygen's getting allowed into that wine. If you aged in a bottle, you might get like honey or petrol notes. So those are tertiary. The longer the aging, the fruits are going to become less fresh in the aromas and on the palate, and the more earthy, the more complex and like dried fruit they're going to become. So the more of these primary, secondary, and tertiary notes or aromas that you're getting usually means you're going to get more complex wines. So now we're on to taste. You finally get to take a sip, okay? If you were at a professional tasting, you might have crackers available or water to make sure your palate is clean. That's always good. The tongue Here's this cartoon that I drew you of the tongue. The tongue actually has over 10,000 taste buds. So different parts of your tongue, your mouth, are tasting different parts that you can relate to the wine. So here's the cartoon. Our tongues can detect like 5 different things: sour, sweet, salty, bitter, and umami. And you can see where those are. We're going to talk about each of them. But almost no wine has saltiness, so we don't even put that on the wine tongue picture. So you don't got to worry about that one. As Manny was saying earlier, sweetness is detected down here on the tip of the tongue. So right at that front, you see the sweetness. And it's the taste of sugars in the wine. So some wines have a small portion of their grapes that all the sugar didn't get turned to alcohol, and that's residual sugar. So that gives it a natural sweetness. So we're not talking about fruit flavors, okay? Wine can be dry, totally dry, but still taste fruity. Then we have acids. All wine is going to have acidic levels because all grapes have acids. So what we're looking for is what is the level of acidity in the wine. So the acidity is also sometimes called how sour the wine tastes, and it creates this mouth-watering sensation on the sides of your tongue and your mouth. It makes like a tingling and makes your mouth water. And the higher the acidity, the more your mouth is going to water. Okay. So if you're drinking the Sauvignon Blanc right now, you should be getting some tingling, right? With red wines, you're also going to perceive tannins. And tannins are very important in the red wines. The tannins are mostly coming from the skins of the grape during fermentation. And the tannins are going to create this cotton bally, drying out feeling. Like if you sucked on a tea bag when you were a kid and you remember that flavor. So it also can put a little bit of bitter taste in the back of your mouth. Then we talk about the body of the wine. So the body is what the wine feels like the weight of it in your mouth. I like to tell people to think about milk. If you think about, so wine can be light, medium, full-bodied, right? So think about milk. You got skim milk, 2%, and whole milk. Light-bodied wine is like skim milk. It's going to feel very light, watery in your mouth. Whereas a full-bodied wine is going to have more like the whole milk feeling. And you can just feel the weight difference. And you'll learn it as you're practicing. You can tell as you're practicing more and more. The alcohol in the wine contributes to the body of the wine. So if you've got higher alcohol wine, it's going to feel fuller bodied. Same with the tannins. High levels of ripe tannins are going to make the wine feel fuller bodied. So now we're on to think. Okay. When we are thinking about the wine, we're assessing the quality. We are looking for balance in everything. Okay. So we want balance in the acidity, in the alcohols, in the tannins, and everything's in good proportion. Nothing should be like too sweet or too sour or too bitter. It should all be balanced. And we want pleasant flavors to last for a long time. So for bigger wines, we also want the complexity to come through and the depth and the layers of the flavors. So when you're thinking and you're assessing the quality, you're going to look at a couple of things. The finish. The finish is how long is that wine lasting in your mouth? Okay. Did it go away right away? Or do you still kind of taste it? You know, are the good parts still getting, you know, a little bit of flavor there? Is it balanced? And if it's a big wine, not like a Pinot Grigio, but, you know, if it's a bigger wine, what is the complexity like? And then most important is, do you like it? Okay. So it can have all that perfect, but do you like it? Because that's really the final thing about if it's good quality for you. And if you want to make it part of your mental scrapbook, then you've got to like it. All right. So, Manny, do you want to show them if they were a fly on the wall during an actual sommelier exam with the Court of Masters, what would it sound like
Okay.
if you were doing a tasting and having to do, which you have to do verbally in this exam, an analysis of this Dollarhide Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay, here we go, shall we? All right, starting off, this wine is very pale and clear lemon with just a hint of green in there. It is star bright and beautiful and twinkly in the glass. No evidence of gas, crystals, or sediment. On the nose. This wine shows a beautiful bouquet with a good dose or a pronounced intensity of citrus. I get mainly ripe lime juice and a bit of pink grapefruit, maybe the rind of the pink grapefruit, but definitely juicy, fresh, vibrant fruit. Secondary aromas, a little bit of peach in there, stone fruit. And I'm getting a touch of maybe cinnamon toast. Super, super, super subtle on that. All right, on the palate. I can confirm the citrus, though it's very much more integrated and balanced than on the nose. The acid is very prominent. I am salivating as I'm trying to speak to you. But there is on the finish, like almost a milky or yogurt-like aspect to that as well. So it's got a little bit of an additional texture in there. The toast aspect that we first smelled is a little bit more prevalent now that we've tasted it. The alcohol seems very well integrated. I don't smell any burn. I don't feel or taste any burn. It's not whiskey. Thank goodness for that. The fruit is still fresh. The acid is nice and round and inviting. And overall, I think the body is weightless, but the finish is memorable, if that kind of makes sense. It doesn't sit on my palate, but I can remember the length on it is pretty good, and it's a memorable finish. Something super positive. I either want to take another sip or have a bite to eat. Successful wine. So in conclusion, this wine is a well-balanced wine, white wine of high quality. It is a dry wine with a ripe attack that lends to a pleasant structure and mouthfeel that is imparted by oak and acid. It makes you, like I said, either want to take another sip or take a bite to eat, and those are both signs of a successful white wine.
Nice.
And then I'd have to say, I think that this wine is a Sauvignon Blanc from Napa Valley, California, 1 to 2 years old. And that's how you have to finish.
Good job. So, and perfect conclusion, the correct conclusion, of course, since you work in our hospitality room.
A little bit.
Yeah. So we thought we would offer it up. Now, if you don't want to do this, but we thought we'd offer it up and let somebody from the audience do you're going to take an exam with the Court of Masters, but a basic tasting analysis, just like if you're in your dining room with friends and family, if somebody wanted to do it. Otherwise, Manny will take it back for the Rutherford Cabernet Franc, and she'll do one like she would do casually with friends. But is anybody volunteering? Come off of mute if you come off of mute. I'll give a couple more seconds.
You can only smell and taste what you smell and taste it, and I would love to know what you guys are smelling and tasting right now.
All right, well, if Manny does this, we want to get some comments on what you smelled and tasted afterwards. So I guess it's all you again, Manny.
All right, so this is at home after the exam. This is how we analyze wine. The wine looks beautiful and it smells amazing in the glass. I don't think there's any gas in here, but it is fairly opaque. I can't really see through the bottom. So it looks like it's very concentrated in color. When I swirl it, it sticks to the glass. So this could be a little bit of weightier wine, Okay, so, and what do we smell? Wow, okay. This wine is ripe with red fruit and plums. I also there's some green bell pepper or like an essence of jalapeno in there. That lends me to believe that this would be a really good wine with food upon tasting it, because the smell is so inviting. Very enjoyable. Again, a really nice acid structure, but not overwhelming. I don't feel like I'm going to spit when I talk to you guys. But it has a really nice weight to it. The tannin is really beautiful. It's a fine tannin, and it kind of encompasses the skin around, in the inside of your mouth without completely sending you dry. It's got really juicy fruit. You can kind of taste and feel the oak aging on it. It's got a little texture to it. But it's not overly tannic. It's not super extra juicy. It's a little bit complicated. It's got some earth in there as well. In general, I think that this is another really well-made, high quality wine. It's fairly complicated as far as having a lot of upfront aromas and flavors, but then once you get into it and start tasting it, you really get some of the other secondary aromas and flavors. I would pour this wine with anything that I'm cooking at home, and I suggest that you all do the same. Anybody smell and taste anything different than I smelled and tasted? There's no wrong answers. Like I said, if you've never had a gooseberry, you're not going to smell a gooseberry. But if you had a jalapeno, you might taste or smell jalapeno. Anybody? I know you have. Well, an excellent wine once again. Good balance of fruits.
Thinking, Manny.
Yes.
Let them think for a second. We did get a question a little bit earlier.
Oh, sorry.
Misty says that they're often asked by the winery visitors if the insulated stainless steel outdoor wine glasses and tumblers will change the taste of the wine.
Interesting. There is a lot of speculation, as there is with most beverages, that anything that's steel or metallic imparts that kind of steel or metallic flavor into the wine. I haven't found that to be true. If anything, those outdoor tumblers are genius for outdoors because A, you're not going to break your wine glasses. B, they're usually double walled, which keeps them at the right temperature longer. And they're just way friendlier. I feel like they're not, a lot of the times they're stemless also, so they're not going to fall down. I don't think it really changes the taste of the wine. Having it outside baking in the sun, that's probably going to change the taste of the wine. Not having it chilled, that's probably going to change the taste of the wine. But, if we're at a picnic, it seems smart to have something non-breakable outside. So for me, if it means that I'm going to not be able to drink the wine because it's broken versus having, one of those Go Vino cups, I'm going to choose Go Vino every time because I would rather taste the wine than cry about it being broken on the floor outside.
Exactly. So Christina says she smells some prune and some dried fruit.
Yes, very good. Yeah, that was one thing. The fruit is definitely on the more cooked and dry side as opposed to like super fresh. I agree with you completely, Christina. Nice job.
And I got another strange question. What shade of lipstick is that? I'm sure because it's on my glass. And you're going to, Misty, if that was you, you're going to be very happy to see that I actually bought a Chanel lip gloss and tried it. Because they're always making fun of me. I always am applying lip gloss. So this is Chanel's called Physical Misty. So one of the few things I can afford from Chanel, our owner. All right, so great tasting. Thank you, Manny. Let's go back over to Chef Todd, our most awaited part of the evening every week, I always feel, and see how he's putting all the tasty notes together with the dish and what he's made us.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Great information on the kind of the background scenes of tasting to really get all the sensory involved in everything and kind of the judging of how wines are basically ranked. And it does eventually lead to an even further enjoyment of wine. So as more you get into it, it's going to take a lot of practice. You're going to have to, unfortunately, or fortunately, you're going to have to buy some more of our wine and keep it around all the time and just open bottles more often and taste and taste and taste. I know that when I first went from restaurants and got into the winery kitchen to familiarize myself more with the wine, I had to painfully taste a lot of wine all the time, constantly. Now, obviously, during work, I'm spitting the wine, but I'm smelling and tasting basically to build up my memory bank. We talked about how almost everything that you smell from aroma adds to the taste. That's what you have to do. The more often that you smell it, you pick it up. There's a lot of times where you might get stumped on something. It's not a right or wrong. It's just a matter of your own individual perceptions, your aromas, some of your memories that you have and things like that. But after a while, it becomes more common, and then you'll pick up a lot more of those characteristics in wine. And it really leads to much more of that enjoyment of wine. And it gives you more ideas of how you might pair food to go along with it. So that's one of the things that I typically do. If I'm working on a dish or first of all, which wine are we going to feature? I chose out of today between the Sauvignon Blanc and the Cabernet Franc, I chose the Cabernet Franc, and I'm actually pushing it a little bit, pushing the limits a little bit, because I'm using some of our summer vegetables that are coming out of our estate right now. So I'm using eggplant and tomatoes and olives and capers in this particular dish called caponata. And what it is kind of a Sicilian originated dish that deals with a lot of vegetables, and it's cooked down into essentially almost like a marinated salad. It's not necessarily a stew where you might have had maybe ratatouille before. It's a little more stewy, a little heavier on the tomato, comes from the Provence region in France. Well, this comes from the Sicily region in Italy. And it's got some really nice kind of bright flavors. It's almost in a little way like a sweet and sour kind of a finish to it. But the vegetables that are in here, and a lot of times people will say vegetarians, their favorite red wine is Cabernet Franc, because it does have in the aroma a lot of those characteristics that they mentioned. I think Manny was talking about maybe some pepper, some sweet pepper, a little bit of green chili in there. So that's one characteristic that I look at if I'm going to use some of that same ingredient in the dish itself. And if you're following along, or if you have that recipe that was sent along with, you know that this caponata has some sweet peppers in there. I'm not necessarily using green peppers because that can be a little bit overwhelming from my sensory standpoint. But it does have the best of what's coming out of the garden from our beautiful tomatoes and our eggplant. And so if you gather up all those ingredients, you pop yourself open a bottle of the Cabernet Franc and you start the whole process. By the time you're done with this, you should have a really nice kind of a marinated vegetable relish that you can either serve cold, you can serve at room temperature, you can also serve it warm if you like. It can be something that you spread onto bread or crostini or toast. You can put it over onto maybe an antipasti platter if you're having cheese and salami, things like that. So it's pretty versatile and it's a great thing to have around. I'll go ahead and show you what I have set up in the kitchen here so you can see some of the organization on it to get the whole dish going. So if you take a look, you'll notice that I've got all these different trays of all the ingredients. And so a couple things here. Number one, I've got some nicely chopped garlic from our garden. You can see how big some of the cloves are getting nowadays. Here's the briny and kind of nice zippy ingredients that you'll find that go into this classically. This has some capers, right? So they are pickled, they're brined, they've got some salt and some acidity to them. They have that green flavor that ties in well with that vegetable. Also, I have green Castrovegiano olives that are from Sicily, as well as some black olives. I thought I would throw the black olives in as well. And you can kind of leave this up to your own personal taste of how much you like in there. I'm using a little bit of basil oil and garlic oil, extra virgin, as well as some red wine vinegar. So here again is that sweet sour kind of concept where you've got tart, briny, a little acidity, but you also have rich flavors like onions, garlic, and extra virgin olive oil. I'm going to finish with some fresh parsley as a garnish to go along with it. I'll show you how I kind of prepped up all of these vegetables by peeling them down, essentially, or chopping them all. And here's some diced onion, always a great foundational thing to have in there. Here's some sweet peppers, not necessarily spicy. And I did stay away from green. So these are some beautiful tricolor sweet bell peppers, and then some fantastic eggplant. So this is a standard eggplant. You can see a large eggplant like that. Now, a lot of people might want to salt their eggplant and draw some of the bitterness out. Some of the liquid comes out of the eggplant tissue itself because it is almost like a sponge in there. You can do that if you'd like to. I don't mind just that tiny bit of bitterness in there. To me, it's not overwhelming by any means. And it does change the texture a little bit, where in this case, it stays a little bit more sponge-like, so it absorbs all those wonderful vegetable flavors and that olive oil that's in there as well. Then you also have some fresh tomatoes. So a fresh tomato from the garden, which I chopped up as well. So if we go and take a look at what I already started here, because it does take a little bit of time to cook it very slowly. The first step on cooking this dish is to cook it slowly in some of that oil. So there's the basil and garlic oil. You can use standard extra virgin olive oil if you like. Just cook it over low heat. So while the whole demonstration was going on as far as the tasting and the sensory parts of it all, you can tell that I cooked these onions. You can see from the very white, where they're opaque and firm and raw and strong, to the point where they're softened and sweetened right here. So after a few minutes at very low temperature, with just a tiny pinch of salt to draw the moisture out, that's going to help release the sweetness and the sweet juices that are in the onion. And then next up, I'm going to go in with some garlic. So I'll put just a little garlic in there, maybe a tablespoon or so. Again, one of those personal taste kinds of things. If you'd like a lot more, go ahead and put more in. But lower temperature, so it's not necessarily sauteing. I want it to be soft. This is basically going to wake up the garlic a little bit. You get those oils to release into it all, and you get away from that extreme raw, sometimes peppery flavor that you have with garlic. So that will soften just a little bit there. Again, over low temperature, low heat, so that it doesn't become browned and nutty tasting. And then after this cooks for just a couple minutes, I'm going to go ahead and speed up this whole process. The next vegetable that will go in will be the bell peppers, because they do take a little bit. They have the skin on there. They do take a little bit of time to actually cook through. You can see that I've got just a little bit of bubble going on there. And that good, healthy olive oil. So I'm going to go in with my bell peppers. Beautiful for color. And then also my eggplant. Now the eggplant's going to take a little while to cook as well. I did leave the skin on my eggplant. I don't mind that texture. As I was saying, I like all the flavor and texture in there. So not only from a color standpoint. So you're going to go ahead and put that in. Give it a good stir. Again, a little pinch more salt, because that will draw the moisture out of these vegetables, as well as season them. Because essentially what it's going to do is cook softly and kind of release its own liquid. So that's where the cooking comes from. You don't necessarily have to put any stock in here. You don't have to add any vegetable stock or chicken stock or tomato juice or anything like that. All of these vegetables have pretty high moisture content to them, and they will release it when they are cooking and as you season them. You want to season progressively, so it's kind of building flavors as it goes, as opposed to just seasoning the outside of all the vegetables at the very end. You do check your seasoning at the end to personal taste. Also, after having a sip of wine, to see what it does and how it reacts with the wine there. So already the flavors, the aromas that I'm picking up, just like what you smell in your glass, I'm smelling in the actual pot here. I smell the garlic, the sweetness. I smell some of the peppers starting to release their juices in there. Just let that go for maybe a minute or two. Next up will be the tomatoes to go in there. And when the tomatoes go in, maybe upwards of a cup, as much as you would like in there, what they will do is kind of break down. So they will soften a bit. It will create a little bit of a coating, almost like a sauce, but it'll also give it some liquid. And then the tomatoes add this incredible amount of umami. And the umami was one of those on the tongue, on the palate, that adds some richness and savoriness. So that adds depth of flavor. And so that's where the tomatoes really come into it. Traditionally, this doesn't have any cheese into it. It's not one of those kind of dishes that you would grate Parmesan right over the top, but it will have that nice kind of brininess to go along with it. So these are becoming more sweet. They're releasing their liquid. They're getting all friendly in there. Again, just a tiny pinch of salt. I'll go ahead and put a couple grinds of black pepper in here, but I can also finish with black pepper at the end. Love those assertive kind of pepper tones to it, because it is going to eventually be a fairly full flavored vegetable salad or relish. All right, so now that we got that going, and again, my heat is not too high. The flame is over low, so I'm not getting a brown saute kind of a charred look. Now I'm going to go in with the tomatoes. And this will take a little while to kind of cook and break down. At the same time, I'm going to go ahead, once I mix this in, the tomatoes will hit the heat. They will start to break down and soften, create a little juice. And I can also go in with my capers, maybe about a tablespoon or so. And I've drained out the majority of the juice, because I think just enough of that brininess from the capers will be good. You don't need to add that extra pickle brine that it was in. And then also my olives. And I'll go with green and a little bit of the black olives in there as well. Love the flavor profiles of those. So brininess, there is a little bit of tannin in there, but there's also some salt characteristic that really adds a lot of flavor. So from here, you can kind of let it cook gently. I can see that there's a little bubble going on in there. If I wanted to cover it to kind of speed up that process, you could do that. But look at those fantastic colors that you see from the garden. Obviously, my peppers are all assorted colors, from beautiful sweet and orange and yellow peppers, but you can use all red if you'd like to. And even if you like green, you can add a little bit of green in there. So don't shy away from that. Leave this up to your own personal taste on this. So also what I'm going to do is add in my couple tablespoons worth of some red wine vinegar. All right. So this is going to add a little liquid, but it's also going to give it that vinegary kind of a offset to all the sweet that is developing. So just a little bit. Remember that there's already olive oil in there. It's almost making its own vinaigrette amongst all these vegetables. So now turning it down low, letting it kind of cook away gently, and then give it a taste maybe in about 8 minutes or so. You can cover it up so it doesn't over evaporate away. And And that way it kind of just cooks very, very softly, very slowly. Afterwards, what you're going to find, and I'll show you one that I made up ahead of time. Here you can see that I have one that's already done where everything is softer. All the flavors have really kind of come together. They all meld into this wonderful relish that we have here. And so you can see that it's all softened. You got the nice glisten of that flavorful oil. The capers are in there. I did finish with just a little bit of some fresh chopped parsley, which is a common thing. Nice green herb, very fresh. Right? If you wanted to put basil in, you can. There's a lot of different variations on this, by the way. There's some traditional ingredients that I did not put in here. One is celery. If you like the crunch of celery and the flavor, that's a typical thing that you'll find in this Sicilian version, but there's a lot of different other versions as well. Some I've even seen with golden raisins in there and pine nuts in there as a garnish. So by all means, you can use your own creativity and put more in there if you'd like to. So this is essentially ready to go. As I taste it, there's still a slight amount of a nice texture to the vegetables themselves. They are not mushy by any means. What I can do is go ahead and plate this. If you wanted to, say, serve this as something into a bowl, you could do that. You could put it in the center or on a little side dish for everyone to kind of help themselves to. If you wanted to use this as a relish to put over on top of a piece of fish, that's really nice. You could do that because it has the brightness and the acidity in there. So if you wanted to put something on like that in a bowl, you could garnish with some of your fresh herbs. I also happen to have to go along with it, since I know I'm having some red wine, I made some nice bruschetta here with some beautiful rosemary bread. So nice char on there, nice toastiness, knowing that it's going with a big red wine that adds to the depth of flavor that you're going to have here. The other one is you could also use it as maybe an individual vegetable relish. Even at this point, with no butter or a cheese in there, it's like a vegan alternative as well if you wanted to. And so what you could do is just take these, garnish like so, put some in. You can also do a nice little drizzle more of the beautiful oils that you have. Good healthy oils. Take a look at these beautiful currant tomatoes that are coming out of our garden for fun. You can pluck a few of those and put them on, or some cherry tomatoes for that extra pop of freshness on there. And then if you wanted to as well, of course, entirely up to you. As I mentioned, you could do some basil. Here's some nice little tiny leaves of basil you can put on for that fantastic pop of flavor. Something along those lines. Few garnishes of some flowers. Of course, this is all me just embellishing because this is what we have going on right now in our estate. This is what our terroir is giving us. So you could do something fun like that, very delicious. You pick up just enough of the peppers in there and the herbaceousness that's common in the Cabernet Franc in the glass. If you wanted to take some of this and build it onto perhaps some of your crostinis individually, you could do that too. Just build your own little appetizer or little bite itself, one by one. These are crispy and crunchy, so you got a contrast. The bruschetta is a little bit more on the soft side, so you have a little textural difference there. Either way, fun thing to have. And as I was mentioning, you can keep it vegetarian or vegan by not adding any butter or any cheese to this if you wanted to. So build yourself a great little appetizer there.
Hey, Chef?
It has everything you need. Yes.
We have a question. Were the capers chopped, and what about the olives? And does it make a difference?
The olives were not chopped, or excuse me, the olives were chopped. And as I mentioned, I did use two different types there, but the capers weren't chopped. I left them on the whole. So if you get up close, you might be able to see there's some that are on the whole. So you get this little pop of excitement of the flavor of the brininess and that little boost of acidity that's in there. So a lot of times that works really well with it. The types of olives you use, of course, that can be up to you. I happen to use the Castelvetrano ones. They are originally a Sicilian type of green olive. And if you wanted to go with a black olive, you could do that as well. Maybe a Kalamata olive or something like that. Any of the Sicilian smaller olives would work too. So either way, a couple of variations. And as I mentioned, you could serve it cold. You could have it out as an antipasti and you eat that along with some nice bread and some cheese and things like that. I have used the caponata as a nice topping to go along with maybe a piece of fish or chicken or something like that as well. So hot, cold, room temperature. I like the way that it smells, and I love all those summer flavors. I love the bracing kind of acidity that you pick up from all those kind of brined and pickled ingredients, as well as the red wine vinegar there. And I think it will be a great match to go along with your Cabernet Franc. So hopefully you give it a try sometime and personalize it. Don't hesitate to personalize it. Just as everyone picks up different smells and aromas and tastes on the wine, the same thing is going to happen here. Remember, you always want to go to a sip of the wine, take a bite of the food, and then go back to the wine and see what kind of slight minor changes or how harmonious they might have all come together. And that's the fun part about wine and food pairing.
Awesome. Yes, thank you, Chef. I think that this is going to be a superior pairing, so you guys should definitely try this either tonight or tomorrow night or sometime over the weekend. I love the idea that you can serve this cold, so you can prepare it the night before and then, serve it the next day.
It is one of those things that, in fact, just like a lot of items that you cook ahead, if you allow it to refrigerate, it becomes even better. All the flavors kind of meld together. So it's like a good stew or a short rib or something like that. If you make it the day before, you chill it down, then you rewarm it, or you just eat it the next day. It has a chance to really develop more flavors.
Yep, love that. I love that. Were there any other questions from anybody? That was a great question about, if we chop the olives or not, or chop the capers or not. That was great. Any other questions? Giving everybody a moment. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Chef Todd. Excellent work as always. And thank you, Tammy, for lending your expertise. I think that if you didn't know anything at all before, you definitely are walking away with a lot of information. So thank you for that. And on behalf of everybody here at Saint-Supéry, just want to thank all of you out in cyberspace for joining us. We sincerely hope that you enjoyed this tasting and that you will join us again in September for Walk in the Vineyards, in the Estate Vineyards on the 2nd and Vineyard to Bottle on the 9th. It is harvest time here in Napa Valley and pretty much everywhere else that in the Northern Hemisphere. And we'll be going behind the scenes with these tastings with the winemaking team and the vineyard and the cellar as they craft our 2021 vintage. So pending any other questions, thanks everybody. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Cheers. Thank you, everyone.